Okay, welcome everyone this morning. I appreciate you coming in early this morning to the 400 expert level deep dive first thing in the morning. My name is Habib Mankal. I'm a principal architect and consultant at Wavecore IT, and also the founder there. I'm also a Microsoft MVP. With me here is my colleague, Michael LaMontagne.
Yeah, I'm Michael LaMontagne. I'm also MVP. I'm a co-founder of Integrate Solutions, and where we help customers on their journey through the M365 stack, as well as solving for roadblocks that customers hit. So we build out products. One of our products is teamsboss.com. That's a voice admin portal for day-to-day operations of Teams Phone. So a lot of knowledge working with customers of all sizes on Teams Phone, and our goal today is to give you the 400 level session for Teams Phone. So we're going to go through notes from the field, as well as some of the maybe tidbits of notes that are on the learn pages and stuff, and what that actually means when you take it to the real world. Let's jump right into it.
So we also have a podcast called O365A because we are both Canadian. So there's two other Canadian MVPs that are with us. Curtis Johnstone and Dino Caputo. Dino is actually here with us this week. But if you want to follow us, there's our YouTube URL where we talk, everything Microsoft 365. From a business perspective, lately we've been doing a lot of deep dive and demos into functionality, and we also like to have a lot of vendor demos and presentations. So we'll bring on a vendor and we'll do some interviews with them as well. So if you want to follow us along there.
And just a shout out, we don't have a counter here, so we're probably going to go long, so we want to make sure we cut off what we have to go through. We probably don't have enough time for questions, but throughout the event, stop us, ask us, bring up scenarios. We're here to share our knowledge, and we love that. Yeah. Okay, you're probably going to see this in every session, but thank you to sponsors to make this event possible. Go check out the expo hall. We have our platinum sponsors shown here, but there's also gold, silver, digital sponsors that make this event what it is.
So we're going to go over these specific topics here. Everyone's favorite one, licensing. Talk about how the integration with Teams Phone, how do you get that working? If you, if you want to demo it for your organization as well. Talk about some of the nuances and use of shared calling. Some capabilities around the delegation side of things, private lines, and then some enhancements around the auto attendant and call queues. And then if we have some time, we have a little bit of a speed round, some specific other features and functionality around Teams Phone and voice if you want to extend some of those capabilities within your organization.
Yeah, we're going to try and get through as much content as possible, so we called it speed round to let us stop when we need to.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so everyone's favorite topic, licensing. So hands up if you know that Microsoft Teams is now removed from all the Office 365 and M365 SKUs. Okay, if you have not, there's like half and half I saw. So now, as you renew your enterprise agreement, you need to also add on a Microsoft Teams license for it. So currently today, right, everything is included, but now you'll see on the, in the column here, they all say no Teams, and then you need to add a standalone one, which is the Enterprise, Microsoft Teams Enterprise, which gets you sort of what you have today, right? Utilizing Teams for, one-to-one calls, chats, group chats, Teams collaboration, meetings, audio conferencing, all that kind of stuff, right? So, as you are going through your renewals, pricing here is MSRP, so it may be less for you within your organization, but we just want to make you aware because it did come out April 1st. Everyone thought it was an April Fool's joke, but it really wasn't. So that was quite a surprise.
Yeah, and the E5s will still include Teams Phone and audio conferencing, so you don't have to also add those. Those aren't getting pulled out of the E5, but you need now the Teams standalone.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so this is just a prerequisite. We wanted to just shout out here for any of the M and O365 licenses from an E5, as Michael mentioned. You still will get your phone system license and your audio conferencing included. So then you just need to add on the enterprise license for Teams. And then you can obviously add on your dial tone, whatever functionality that you wanted, whether you're going to be using calling plan, operator connect, direct routing. Same goes for the E3 version of the licensing. However, in this scenario, you actually have to add your phone system and audio conferencing, just like you do today, right? But the only difference between them is now you have to add Teams enterprise license on both of them. Correct. Yeah. So because we're talking about voice and some of the devices that you can have within your organization around phones, we wanted to just quickly touch on the two different licenses around shared device license and Teams Room. We're only talking about the Teams Room Pro here because the basic one is really, it's not really good for even testing because you don't really get a lot of the advanced features that you're going to use within your organization. So if you're looking at putting in Microsoft Teams Rooms, you're going to want to look at the Teams Pro licensing. And so from a meeting room perspective, those are from a lot of the vendors that are here. There's Logi, there's Neat. Who else? Crestron, yeah, a lot of the other vendors as well. But in addition, that if you want to just have a telephone within your room, like the Star telephone, like the old the 8800 Polycom, just to provide like a telephone within your room, you need to have that Microsoft Teams Pro license to have that, right? So
to get the one-touch
to get the one-touch join, right? If you have a meeting or an audio conference bridge that you just want to join by itself. And then on the shared device, these are generally used for like common area phones, phone that you're going to have in the kitchen or in the front desk area and stuff like that, or phones around the building, maybe near the elevators and such. Those would be what the shared device license that you're going to need for those. Copilot, who's heard of that? So just wanted to quickly just touch on some of the licensing because we are going to talk a little bit about Copilot around how to use it with Microsoft Teams Phone. So earlier this year, January 2024, Microsoft announced that now it's available for all the different SKUs. So if you have like an enterprise agreement or you're working with a CSP, a cloud service provider or solution provider, or purchasing direct with them, you are allowed to buy that license. Prerequisites for that from a business perspective, you need to have minimum standard or business premium, and then any of the Office 365 or M365 A or E SKUs. There is a caveat on the licensing for Copilot, whereas you cannot purchase more licenses of Copilot than you have your business or enterprise SKUs. As an example, if you have 100 business premium licenses, you cannot buy more than 100 Copilot licenses. So I just wanted to quickly call that out.
Sure. So if we're talking about a 400 level session, just showing you Copilot in Teams is not going to do that. That's it's pretty easy to set up. So what I wanted to do is talk through how I got this into a demo. Key here is if you're licensing for Copilot and you want to get your organization to use it, how do we show what is possible while we have this licenses? So maybe as the IT team, hey, let's get a great demo showing so that we can record it, share it internally. So a couple caveats, and how many OC or Operator Connect partners do we have in the audience? Just a show of hands. Okay, so we're going to talk about a few things. So again, on the technical side, we're going to kind of go into the field notes. So first thing, when you're working with an Operator Connect provider, some operators still may ask you to consent to adding them into your tenant and then putting phone numbers in your tenant. This actually is no longer needed. Operators can just put numbers into your tenant if they have your tenant ID. So in our scenario, we have a shared tenant for demoing Copilot. That tenant didn't have phone in it. We weren't able to get calling plan licenses into that. The global admin is not us. He was traveling around. So we're like, what is the easiest way to demo Copilot in phone? So we were like, okay, OC. We don't need a global admin to do any DNS or domain approvals, no validations, no creating of users. So we reached out to an OC provider, Scipio. They were great to get us a quick trunk and a couple numbers. We basically said, hey, here's our tenant ID. They threw some numbers in. We talked to the global admin. We're just like, just put the numbers on our users. We'll do the rest. So Pretty easy from an admin point of view. Obviously, if you're using the other options, you have to deal with licensing and some of the tenant config. So although this is still here, it is not actually needed by the providers. The other thing, and this may not be easy to read, we're going to post the PowerPoint after so you can see this, but I don't know why OC partners still ask for tenant IDs. One line PowerShell command can get you the tenant ID for any domain. So ask your customers just for what is the primary on Microsoft domain or any domain in the tenant versus having them trying to hunt for the tenant ID. So simple PowerShell one-liner, I put it into my PowerShell profile so I could just hit tenant. Here's the domain, here's the ID, I'm done. So I thought it was going to be clever. There's an IVR that someone at Twilio created for calling. It's called Calling Oats, and you can basically call in. You could trigger a number, and it'll play a Hall & Oates song. I'm like, hey, this will be a great Copilot demo. I'll have it play in the background. I don't have to me and Hab saying test, test, 1, 2. That's going to be boring. Doesn't work with transcription. So as soon as Microsoft detects that it's music, wasn't pulling into the transcription, which made not for a great scenario for a demo, but great to test IVRs if you're doing phone validation or something like that. So this is what the demo kind of looks out. So how I did this was we got operator connecting the tenant, very low effort. I then grabbed a bunch of content off of Scipio's page because they were the ones that gave us the phone numbers. I created an auto attendant, and I put all the text off their FAQ into the text-to-speech of the greeting of the auto attendant, as well as the menu greeting. So then I was able to call in and basically have the text-to-speech play into the transcription. So it calls in, and so basically, just like meetings, we can now trigger Copilot. It turns on transcription. It opens up the Copilot panel. And the great thing with this, so if you're thinking about how do we get more value of our Copilot investment, agents that are maybe in a Teams contact center that you're using and they're making a lot of calls, you can ask questions while you're on that call. You can see the sentiment of the call. There's a lot of sample prompts. So hey, what are the topics that we discussed today? What are the outstanding questions? Everything you ask in the kind of the Copilot panel is also available after the call with the Copilot icon from the call history. So pretty powerful. I use it for summarize the call. What is the recap? The typical kind of subscribed ones, I ask specific questions on what are the policies around emergency calling? What is the advantage of OC versus direct routing? And then at the end, hey, is there any outstanding items? Or for a follow-up, what questions should I ask based on that conversation? So a lot of value of adding Copilot, and I think we've checked the box of talking about AI in our session because we have 2 other sessions going on with AI, so I think we covered that. Okay, shared calling. So there is a session today, I think it's a level 200 that goes into the details. We're not going to talk about setting up shared calling, we're going to talk about the notes from using shared calling. So think of shared calling as extensions 2.0. So we have a primary main number, we have a whole bunch of people using that number. The benefit of and why I call it 2.0 is if you call emergency services, then it's able to take an additional number out of a pool, and then you get that direct call back from the PSAP. So better than extensions, because if you had only extensions, when someone calls back, they're going to hit the directory, or maybe hit a virtual attendant. That doesn't get meet the requirement of getting back to the original caller. If you're doing this through PowerShell, make sure you're using the latest PowerShell module. 5.5 was the original one. There's a new 6.1 that's came out this month, and probably even a newer one. Always make sure your PowerShell module is up to date. You need to license, of course, with Teams Phone. So now that we have Teams separated from the Office SKUs, you'll need that Teams base and phone. Whatever you configure for shared calling, it has to be end-to-end the same provider. So if you're doing calling plans, the calling plan main number on the resource account is a calling plan number. The numbers from the emergency address pool are going to be a calling plan number. Make sure the service is end-to-end the same. For calling plans, you can't just use the domestic plans. You have to use the pay-as-you-go plans. You do have to work with either NCE, with the new Commerce experience, or comms credits, which is going away. The resource account needs to be configured to place outbound calls. So if you're doing direct routing, you need an outbound voice routing policy. The inbound is going to go to an auto attendant or call queue. Both are supported. I think the documentation just says auto attendant. You'll need your emergency address number pool, emergency addresses, and you still need to go through PowerShell to voice enable your users. So you can do everything else now through the Teams Admin Center, except for the final steps to get the dial pad to show for your users. You'll need a shared call routing policy. This also can be all now built in the Teams Admin Center. Much easier to do in the Teams Admin Center than PowerShell. The emergency call routing policy, so if you want to do any kind of routing of the emergency services to the right trunks. And then you can also use a caller ID policy. So I'll talk about why you may want to use a caller ID policy in addition to shared routing or shared call routing. And there's a few limitations. So you can't use this today with SIP gateway devices. So SIP gateway devices do need to have primary phone numbers. So when you register to it, you're getting an error saying, hey, this end user does not have a phone number. So that should be fixed eventually. But today, if you do have any legacy SIP devices that you're using, shared calling is not going to be for that scenario. You can't use dial plans to call users that are enabled for shared calling. So you can't do short dials or extension dials in your dial plan and say like 1234 rings Bob, because Bob doesn't actually have a line URI anymore. So that's one thing to think about. You could use an auto attendant with a dial by name directory, or you can use the Azure AD or Entra ID attributes for extension dialing, but that would be through an auto attendant. And if you're still using direct routing, there's no indication through the SIP messaging that someone's using shared calling. So if you're doing a per number pricing model, this could be a problem for you because all calls look like they're coming out through that number. There's no PI or forward headers that will indicate that shared calling. Operators do have the ability to disable it, so that's a little bit different on the Operator Connect side. Good segue. So empowering cloud. Tom's actually presenting in parallel with us right now. He's been reaching out to the operators to see who is supporting shared calling or not. Again, these are the operators that Tom has been able to pull and get some results. There's about 10 operators that have it. There's one that doesn't, and the rest have not indicated. So a lot of great research material on Tom's empowering cloud. Okay. So from an enablement, and this might be a little hard to read, so in the Teams Admin Center, you can enable it. The key things here is whatever resource account you put for the primary number, make sure there's no ... on any of those indications. So if you think about, I put a direct routing number on a resource account, I put it in shared calling, well, you typically don't send an emergency address. So you won't be able to finish this configuration until you actually put an emergency address. But that goes for resource accounts. So when you have a service number, typically it doesn't have the emergency address already allocated to it. So this is one way to do that. There's a known problem. So I had a customer that set up a temporary service number to get everything built because they were doing a porting. They were porting it as the wrong usage type, so they had to flip it. So then when they finished the port, they were just going to swap numbers. Well, they couldn't swap the number on the resource account because the resource account was tied to a shared calling policy, and the new number didn't have an emergency address. So it was blocking it. He wasn't able to tell really from the Teams Admin Center what was going on. But what you basically do is switch it to a user number, put an emergency address on, flip it back to a service number, and then put it onto the resource account. So just keep in mind when you're in here, anything that has a ... make sure that you define it. What is the voice app? What is emergency location? And then by default, the emergency pool is going to default to the resource number. But what we want to do is create a pool so that we have numbers dedicated for callback. And make sure that the type is the same. So direct routing, calling plan, or operator. So caveat, you may see once in a while this feature of the red banner in the Teams Admin Center. Doesn't give you very much information. So in this case, it says invalid resource account. Either the phone number is not assigned or the resource account does not have a valid license. Both of those are incorrect. It was configured correctly. If you open up the developer tools within your browser, go under the network tab, look at the same error message, it'll actually tell you what's wrong. This resource account does not have an emergency address. So if you ever see a red error in the Teams Admin Center, fire up the browser developer tools, look at the network tab, you'll get more details.
Yep.
Yeah. Great thing now with the integration in the Teams Admin Center, you can look at a user that is configured for shared calling. You can see what the primary number is. You can see the emergency address or the emergency pool. So in this case, 98 is the emergency pool and 99 is the primary number. We're able to put the policy, the calling policy or caller ID policy, as well as shared calling policy on the user. So everything is in the Min Center, but when we go look at the user, still no dial pad. So that is that extra step of going into PowerShell, enterprise voice enabling the user, and then the dial pad will light up. So one day we'll see this in TAC, hopefully, so that we can enable users that don't have phone numbers for agents for call queues, as well as shared calling. The caller ID, so the pop-up. So if you were to create a caller ID policy that just says, hey, we want to replace the display name, but still use the user number, this actually won't do anything. So shared calling, they don't actually have a phone number. So in this case, this policy actually won't apply and do anything. So we'll just get the generic call pop with the phone number, which is the 99 number. If you do create a caller ID policy and reference the resource count, whatever resource count, and configure the display name, then you'll get the expected result. So this is going to demo that. So if you dial emergency services, so in my case, I'm just dialing 933, it'll probably pop really quick. But basically, in the pop-up card, you'll see the 98 number, which is the emergency pool, as well as the user's display name. So in this case, we're taking a number out of the pool, calling emergency services. In this scenario, the user's just calling out with no caller ID policy, regular call. We get the primary 99 number, no display name. And then in this scenario, work with the caller ID policy. We have the display name and then whatever number was tied to the resource count on the caller ID policy. Delegation.
Right. As Dino always calls me, the delegator. So yeah, we're talking about delegation within Microsoft Teams. So what is it, right? It's the ability to provide someone to answer calls on my behalf, make calls on my behalf, also change my call flow settings, or provide them the ability with those with that capability. So there's a couple of different ways that you can achieve this goal, right? So you can do it both from a user level and an admin level, but there's a little bit of a trick to do everything on the admin level side of things. There are some limitations around numbers. So a user can only be a delegate of 25 managers, and a manager can only assign 25 delegates to them. So those are
That's the documented.
That's documented. Yeah, we're not sure if it's a soft or a hard limit. I've never tried it. I don't have 25 user and laptop and browser accounts to create that. So, anyways, so it's, just from a capability and limitation perspective, you can pretty much do everything from the desktop and an actual IP phone, except the limitation is on the mobile device, whether it's iOS or Android, where you can see the delegate view of the manager's call activities, and then also delegate or a manager can hold or resume a call. So you can't do that from a mobile phone perspective, but you can do everything else from the Teams desktop, whether you're on Mac or Windows, and from an IP or web browser perspective. So we just wanted to call out this couple of nuances there. So some scenarios here. So we have Carol and Bob here in a boss admin or a vacation perspective. So Carol is the CEO of her company. Bob is her EA, and she essentially makes Bob a delegate, and whether or not he can make or receive calls on her behalf, or maybe change the delegation policies or configuration for her. And the same thing goes for if, let's say, I'm going on vacation and I need somebody to sort of back me up, I can add somebody as a delegate of mine, or even like a team call. I can create a group call pickup, I guess, for a certain amount of members of my team. So if somebody calls my number, it will ring everybody else. And if they're unavailable, then it would just go to my voicemail, right? And then, in the couple of scenarios that we were talking about, you can have, one manager can have multiple EAs or admins. So you can see here we have 1-to-N ratio where Carol's the CEO. She has multiple admins such as Bob and Aaron. And then in the top right, we have one admin for multiple bosses, right? And then one scenario that we want to call out that is not supported is that I cannot be a delegate of Michael, and he cannot be, well, I can be a delegate of Michael, but he cannot be a delegate of me. So you can't have that circular delegation, so you can only have a one-way delegation.
Yeah, we just tagged as boss to boss, B2B, not supported.
Yes, exactly. So there is a new capability within delegation now that you can actually see the active call of your person that you're a delegate from. And so there you're able to actually join. So what happens here in this scenario, Carol, the CEO, she receives a call. She's on a phone call. Bob's her EA. He can see the active call that's currently happening and join the active call. Once Bob joins the active call, it then becomes a meeting, Microsoft Teams meeting, because it basically is more than 2 participants. Then everything gets upgraded to like an audio conference. Bob can leave the call. The call will still be active. Carol's still there, but then he can also rejoin the phone call. So, there is that one scenario there. Then the other scenario is that, Carol receives the call. She's speaking. She puts that call on hold. And then Bob sees the call there. It actually is on hold, so he'll click on resume. The one thing that does happen when he clicks on resume, Carol gets actually dropped from the actual phone call. But she'll see the active phone call that's currently there, and then she can rejoin that call, right? So just a little note that when, if you place a call on hold and your delegate picks it up, you'll get dropped from that call, but you can always rejoin it. And then once you join, if there's more than the 3 parties there, or the 3 parties or more, then it becomes upgraded to a conference call. So in this scenario here, we're going to talk about it from the admin side. So on the user side, we'll talk about it as well. But as an administrator, in the Teams Admin Center, you can now create, or add some, I guess you want to call it like 3/4 of the delegation capabilities that you can do that an end user can do. But there's a little trick that we'll tell you how to do it. Is the video playing? Okay, yeah. So we have a user here. Administrator wants to, assign delegation for Megan Brown. So we're logging into the Teams Admin Center. You can go to the Voice tab, and then if you scroll down, you have the call answering rules, where you can say also allow call delegation, group call pickup, different other functionalities. But here's where I can assign and add one or more people within your system. So here we're assigning Adele Vance as a delegate for Megan. And then you can see in the permissions here, they have the ability to make calls, receive calls individually, or make and receive calls, or can't make or receive calls. But within Microsoft Teams, like the actual desktop client, you also have the ability to assign the user to make those type of changes on their behalf. So they can come in here and they can make these policy changes within here. So you can see here, who am I signed in as? I'm signed in as Adele here. And then you can see here that I'm a delegate. But I'm unable, to say pick up held calls or join active calls. And so when you're doing it from the admin center, it does 3/4 of it, but it doesn't complete it. So let's say I guess Megan wasn't available to make that necessary change. What you could do as a workaround is you can add yourself as a delegate and then sign in as yourself, then make the changes, because I had the ability to make the changes for the calling policies. And then once I have that, I can assign that capability for Adele to say, Adele is able to join active calls, and resume active calls on behalf of Megan. So that's just a little bit of workaround from the Teams Admin Center side of things. That if you
add
yourself, then you have the ability to make those necessary changes for the delegates, because
from the Teams client.
From the Teams client.
And then you can remove yourself.
Yeah. So then, I guess you'd want to remove yourself afterwards, because you don't want to also take calls for.
And the other caveat in the Teams Admin Center is you can't manipulate the delegates unless some part of the call for answering rules reference delegates. So you may put also ring or something to have delegates, set up all the delegates, add yourself, go in the client, add the settings, remove yourself, and then change off the auto or also answer or also ring.
Yeah. So, I mean, this scenario here was the ability that Adele, she was assigned the privileges from the Teams Admin Center, but she could log into the client now and then check off those boxes for herself. But we also wanted to just touch on the administrator side. If Megan was unavailable or even Adele was not available to make those changes, the admin can add themselves as a delegate, make the necessary changes, and then remove themselves as a delegate.
Private line. Okay. So this is notes from the field with private line. It's all done in PowerShell. This is meant to be a secondary phone number for your users. So this is not meant to replace the primary number. So this scenario is meant for inbound. The number is not shown in the client in any way. There's some caveats there. If for whatever reason the primary phone number is removed off the user, the private line will end up becoming the primary number showing in the client. As well as if you assign a private line to someone that's with shared calling, the user won't use any of the shared calling stuff. They'll actually use the private line number shown in the client. So make sure it's a secondary number. Make sure that the primary number doesn't get removed. It must match the PSTN type of the primary number. So if the user is using Operator Connect for the primary number, Operator Connect again for the private line. It ignores call routing rules, so simmering and forwarding. There's a debate about do not disturb. So some scenarios it seems to work, some scenarios it doesn't. Depends on devices and endpoints. But the idea is your private line gets to that user directly, doesn't trigger their delegates, doesn't trigger the also ring, and some of those other settings. There's a separate ringtone. So when you have an incoming private line call, you'll hear a different tone. You can't change it. So it's not like your other call settings where you can change the different ringtones. Private line is tagged as a label on the banner, both on the incoming call as well as in the call history. And everything's done in PowerShell. So if you're using the get and set CS phone number assignment, you're going to be using a category, assignment category is private. Some of the Microsoft documentation says that this category is internal use only. I think that was pre-private line coming out, but you do need to use this for private lines. The results from set CS phone number assignment is limited by default to 500. So if you have a large tenant and you're like, I just want to list all my private lines, chances are you're going to miss some results. So you can use a kind of a workaround of using a dash top and put some value in there. I use int max value, which just puts the largest integer in there, but you could put 1,000, 10,000, whatever you want as the value. And the private line doesn't show on Get CS Online users. So if you are just looking at an individual user, you can't just do that. Look at the line ID, line your eye and look for private line under CS Online user. You do have to use the phone number assignment commandlet.
What would be a scenario that we would use the private line in?
You have an executive that wants to share out a number that bypasses delegates. That's probably the most common one. Or if you have a scenario like contact centers. A lot of the third-party contact centers do an integration over direct routing. So in the scenario is they usually use headers to say don't listen to the agent's call forwarding settings. This is a way you could do that without having to worry about headers. So you could put a secondary number on your agents, have the contact center hunt the agent with that private line, and that way if they set their calls to forward to voicemail, that would be ignored and stuff like that. To do private line, again, we use the set CS phone number assignment commandlet, so maybe not visible to everyone, but we're using the, you set the proper usage type or number type. So in this case, it's calling plans. You set the assignment category as private, and then you just specify the number on the identity. And then again, if we're doing a get, you could filter based on the private category, and then you just want to manipulate your top to get the results that you need. Okay. Inbound call, you're going to see that it's calling your private line, so you have that indication, and then you have a private line label on the items within your history.
All right, so attendance and call queues. So one of the, I guess, most asked items from a Teams Admin Center side of things is the ability to provide, managers or supervisors or anybody else that with the ability to manage these Teams attendance and call queues. So you're giving them access to log into the Teams Admin Center, make the necessary changes because it reduces that stress or additional work on the Teams admin, right? So what we want to talk about here initially is I think there was the announcement in the Enterprise Connect a couple of weeks ago, where in Teams Premium license, you're also going to be getting what's called a Queues app. And the Queues app is going to be able to provide you, all the different call queues that you are a part of, give you, some of the metrics that are happening within, those particular call queues. It also provides you a nice individual, I guess, a location to make a call from that queue, and it will actually dial out from, using that PSTN of that. And you can see there, at the very top, I'm part of 2 different call queues, Woodward Bank, and then the other one I'm part of the support side. So I can flip between the 2 of them, and then obviously when I get calls, it'll be tagged as the particular call queue or the auto attendant that the call is coming in from.
Yeah, and there's a session tomorrow, last session of the day, that's a phone roadmap session. So make sure you attend. Microsoft will be presenting that. They're at the back of the room, so if you have any questions, go see them. So we won't talk a lot about roadmap, but this is a lot of marketing and information about this Queues app coming, and it's being tied to the Teams Premium licensing.
So as I mentioned before, being able to have these, the capability to provide, a manager or supervisor capability, they're called authorized users. And you need to create what's called a voice application policy within the Teams Admin Center. But within here, you can see it's broken down into if you're doing it in an auto attendant, are you going to allow them to change, all the different business hours within the auto attendant? In the call queue side, are we going to be able to allow welcome greeting, shared voicemail, greeting, timeouts, etc. So as you're going through as the Teams administrator is going through the configuration of the auto attendant, or let's say, post there's one already there or a call queue, they can come in and go to the authorized users section within the auto attendant or call queue, and then add the particular user that you want to have do that. And then what would happen is the administrator or the manager or supervisor would then be able to go to admin.teams.microsoft.com, and they would see the auto attendants or call queues that they would be able to manage.
Yeah, so something to think about here is it's limited in the settings that you can configure today. We'll talk about what's available or what's been kind of documented in PowerShell. Right now it's really about greetings. That's going to change. The key thing here is for a user, like if I put Hab into this authorized users policy that can do all these settings, any auto attendant or call queue that I add him to, he's going to be able to make those manipulations. So at this time, we can't have a user that can change certain things on an auto attendant versus other things. Whatever they're authorized in the policy, whatever auto attendants and call queues they've been added to, they get all the settings from the policy that they can manipulate.
Yeah. And then just also note that you have to actually add the individual user. You cannot use groups to do these type of assignments. Yeah, so then when the actual user logs in, they go there, but they can all see it within the actual Teams client. Now you can see here for this particular switchboard, they have the ability to modify the different business hour greetings, holiday greetings after hours, and then on the other side, when it comes down to the call queues, they can make just as necessary modifications there to say, calls receiving, and then change the music on hold and the voice routing side of things as well. So you can do it both in the admin side and then on the desktop client, Teams client side.
So little tribal knowledge, but I follow the GitHub Learn pages, versions of the Learn pages, so whenever there's an update, I can see what's going on. So if we look at what's available through the PowerShell commandlet, That's not in the Teams admin center. We do have more settings in auto attendance and call queues. They're not lit up yet, but we know that from a policy point of view, the infrastructure is there to support these features. So being able to change time zones, languages, routing, agents being opt-in and opt-out, presence methods, routing methods. But we also have a whole bunch of features that look like they're tied to the Queues app because they're not directly mapped to auto attendance and call queues. So being able to deal with reporting metrics, monitor modes, some listen and whisper features. So hopefully we'll hear some of this information tomorrow, but this is in the commandlet today. It just doesn't do anything. So you can see where they're going from improving the kind of delegation of management of auto attendance and call queues and the investment in the Queues app.
Right, so just show of hands, anybody use the Power BI Teams templates? Okay, so there's an updated version of it that includes, the cloud auto attendant and call queue analytics, and then there's also the agent as well there. Just giving you, the metrics of the, incoming calls, the received, max duration, average duration, just on sort of the analytics side, sort of on the auto attendant side. Sorry, not the agent side, but in the call queue one, that's where you get the additional, call queue metrics and stuff. And then also from the agent perspective. So there are a couple of known features. Only 28 days of call history available. And then the other one here is only the calls and caller actions in the first call queue that answers the call are reported on. And then calls in chain call queues aren't reported on. So if you have nested call queues, then it's not going to get those metrics. So it's only the first one in the list. If I have a call queue nested to another call queue because of a timer or timeout or max agents available, the metrics on the secondary call queue will not be tagged, right? So they won't get any, analytics and metrics here.
Yeah, and it just came out as the ability to delegate access to these reports using the authorized users or voice policies.
Yeah, and then just on the administrator side of things as well, they can obviously use the analytics in Power BI, but then there's just some built-in reporting and metrics within the actual Microsoft Teams Admin Center to be able to see, what are the amount of calls that happen within a particular day. Same thing for the auto attendant in here, and then on in the bottom metrics there, it'll actually show you the total count, time of day, and what actual call queue or auto attendant that phone call went into. So you have those kind of out of the box kind of metrics there without using any of the ones on the Power BI.
And you can get to these reports right from the auto attendant and call queue screens within the Teams Admin Center. You just check in front of one of them, and there'll be a reporting icon that light up. Then it jumps into the analytics, filtered down to that specific call flow. Okay, notes from the field on advanced call flows. So see how far we get through this. So there's a change coming that you're going to now need to be a global admin or user admin to create resource accounts for auto attendance and call queues. So this is a change coming in July of this year. So the Teams communication admin or the Teams admin role will not be enough to create these resource accounts. Trick for auto attendants is by default an auto attendant will attempt 3 times to satisfy. If a user puts in the wrong prompt or picks in no prompt, it'll time out and repeat 3 times before dropping the call. If you define an operator and put the operator as a key option within the menu, even if it's not an option you say that's there, like hey star or pound or something like that, when the 3rd attempt happens, it'll actually just redirect you to the operator. So it'll say, sorry, we're having an issue. Instead of dropping the call hard, it'll say we're going to connect you to an operator. You can't change that greeting, but at least the call doesn't do a hard failure. Another known feature is if you select personal voicemail and call queues, it doesn't actually go right into voicemail. So if you select the option, it'll actually ring the user first, and then when the user times out, it'll go to voicemail. Yeah, not sure about why that's the case. Another known feature is keep your call queues under 200. So if you do set the call queue max calls to 200, there is an issue that if you go over that, the call queue might get into an unstable state. and you may not be able to answer any of those calls. So set that number lower than 200. Use cascading queues if you need to go over 200, but stay away from that number. Shared voicemail, although it doesn't indicate it in the Teams admin center, you can use distribution lists. I'm a fan of distribution lists over M365 groups, especially just for voicemail purposes. So create distribution lists, put your shared mailbox in there. You don't have to put a license. You can cover that voicemail scenario versus spinning up an M365 group, deal with email alerts and notifications and membership. Much cleaner way to do it. Auto attendants are missing support for custom greetings when you pick shared voicemail. So you may, if you do want to have a custom greeting, you'll just send it to a call queue that auto times out to shared voicemail, and then you can put your custom greeting. Exception handling on call queues. The call timeout will still play the greeting. The other exceptions won't. So if you do max callers or no agents, the greeting won't play. If you have a greeting defined, it'll just go right to whatever that exception routing is. The one for timeout, so timeout after 0 seconds, it will still play the greeting even though the timeout has been reached. I watch GitHub, as I mentioned, for any commits on the MS Learn pages to see what's coming. So news support, I didn't even catch this, but in the Teams admin center, you can now put an audio file or text-to-speech for most of the redirect options within call queues. So instead of just hanging up the call, you could just say call back during business hours. So it's great to see that on all the menu options. I think the biggest one that's sitting out there in the Learn pages is courtesy callback. So being in a queue and just leaving your number basically and getting called back when you're the next one up. There's a whole bunch of settings on what is coming. It's all documented in the PowerShell script, but definitely interesting to see not a contact center, but getting closer functionality. And then the last one is there's a priority status that's also shown on the PowerShell commandlet. So as you start cascading call queues, you could set, hey, if you went through this queue, maybe prioritize this over calls that are in this other queue. So interesting things to watch based on the documentation.
Yeah, and I just wanted to quickly comment that, as Michael mentioned, these are coming closer to the contact center side of things, specifically just on voice. But if you still require that multimodal capabilities and advanced call flow routing, you'd want to go with a contact center company and provider. Do like text messages, like chats, and all that kind of email support, et cetera, right? So we're strictly just talking about it from a telephony perspective here.
Yeah. All right, so we have 12 minutes. Let's see how many of these we can get through.
Okay, let's see. Okay. We still have everyone? Okay. Oh yeah, so Teams Telephony Administrator is me. It's me. Yeah, Teams Telephony Administrator. I know, right? Teams Telephony Administrator. So this, if you're not aware, this is actually a new role in Entra ID that provides the capability for really more of an operational type user. So they can only come in here, modify telephone numbers for the users and assignments. They can't make any changes to like resource accounts or those type of things.
They can't manipulate conference bridges.
That's right.
Meeting settings.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's really just from like a phone number management kind of thing. So it's I would say it's probably the lowest privileges that you could have. Like you don't even have the ability to go in and see any type of analytics on the user to see whether they were
good
on a
call,
call, good
call.
call quality, bad call quality, and stuff like that. So if you want to provide like an operational thing to just say, hey, you are only allowed to assign phone numbers, this is the account that you want.
Yeah, and some interesting things. So you can't export these tables to Excel. The icon is missing in this role, but you could do it through PowerShell, so I'm not sure about that. But yeah, as Hab mentioned, you can't see the good call versus poor calls. You can't see devices, can't see meeting settings. It's really for phone number assignment.
But if you're passionate about those, talk to the guys tomorrow afternoon.
Right. Paging in Teams. So I'm not sure how many people know this, but you can actually activate the app switcher within Poly CCX devices, so Teams native devices, so that you can have a scroll at the top and basically trigger paging, multicast paging right from the handset. This is the XML to import it. We will share the slides after, but basically you turn on the app switcher so you get the drag down from the top, And then whatever you've set for the paging trigger, that's a now available button on the screen. Of course, if it's just listening to multicast page, you still have to activate the ability to use it, but you could turn off the icon to trigger a page. That's also available on Yealink phones. In this scenario, you have to turn on the hybrid mode to enable multicast paging. You get this little bouncing ball, well, not bouncing ball, but you get this little SIP ball that you can kind of slide around. When you trigger that, it flips into the other mode, so you can do like program keys to trigger different paging zones and stuff like that. So even though these phones are in Teams native modes, you can use some of the device platform functionality to maybe satisfy some paging needs. Of course, if you want to do the certified multicast paging, Algo, they have a session today as well, I believe, or maybe tomorrow. So, hey, you do a Teams call into a device like the paging server, and then that will actually send the multicast trigger to maybe all your handsets and stuff like that. So still be able to support paging, even though Teams native doesn't support paging.
Yeah, we also had the Algo team on our podcast, did an interview with them as well. So if you want to listen to that along with their discussion tomorrow or today.
So engineering tools. So we have the ability to activate some of the events client features within the Teams desktop client. So if we go into the specific folder, there's this configuration JSON file where the Teams client is. And if you put the dev menu enabled to true, that will give you the ability on your Teams client to have this right-click engineering tools. So you have the ability to open the developer tools if you're doing like Teams app development. I have this additional command that I put on that just triggers the dev tools to open when I launch the client. You do not want to do this for production users or anything like that. It gets super annoying, but you can do that for troubleshooting and different features within the client. And we also have, so how many of you worked with Link in Skype for Business and remember Snooper? Okay. So this is not quite that, but this is the closest thing you're going to get to this.
Super light.
So this is a built-in ability to leverage the developer tools within Teams, the Teams client. And if you turn on local storage or local storage.localDebug to true, all of a sudden you see all the interactions with the call controller. So if you're dialing, hey, we're troubleshooting a 911 issue, or we can see what normalization rules are happening and the different steps through the client. So I'm going to show that because we have a couple minutes. So I have the developer tools open. We're going to go to the console, hopefully type something. So if I was just to paste it in, oh, of course, I've already triggered it. So if you try and paste this command in, it's going to give you a browser error that says, we don't allow pasting, type in allow pasting, so you just manually type that, or you can just type this manually. And so when you do that, that goes into the local session storage. So that means when I exit the client, it'll still be in there. So you want to make sure to remove this when you're done debugging. You can do this in a browser or with the engineering tools. We have to relaunch the client. So I'll show you what we're seeing right now. So this has been running the whole session. You can see there's a little bit of information in here. Not much going on. It's kind of blurry when we scroll too fast. But if I exit the client, and just make sure I exit completely.
I'm going to need Copilot to understand all that stuff.
So this is definitely down the rabbit hole. Let's see. Wait for it to launch.
All jokes aside, you'll probably be able to use it to help decode it, but just be mindful to redact any corporate information.
So you can see
logs before you do it.
Yeah, it's going crazy right now. So if we were to do like a 933, or if you want to see what different policies are applying, this is probably the easiest way to see what's going on. So hey, we got an emergency policy, what policy is being applied, the dial string, the different routes. So this is the closest that we can get to Snooper, and then make sure to remove it so that it is not always running. And you can find that in the session, local debug, and delete. So we don't have enough time to go too deep into this. Microsoft released this on GitHub. This is the call record insights. So this is pulling that information that's only kind of available for 28 days into a Cosmos database so that you can keep it longer term, kind of in your control, data at rest in your tenant. This basically, you download it. It's a PowerShell command. You populate with all your Azure information, naming, tenant location or region that you want to deploy into. It spins this all out. The TechNet or the tech community article shows like this awesome visualization that's not included in it with it right now. So there's no dashboards. So you do need to write your own, Cosmos or SQL queries against the data. But this is, something if you want to, work with some of the analytic data or call detailed records, build your own reports. This is an option. Because it's posted on GitHub, I don't think it's officially Microsoft supported. Similar to like the company communicator and some of those other things that Microsoft released, they would kind of package the code, but it's going to be on you to really deploy and maintain and pay for the Azure services. Okay.
Yeah, we just wanted to, again, thank all our sponsors here. Please go and visit them out in the expo hall and talk to them about all the awesome products and things that they can do and help your organization as well. I think we have 4 minutes. We could probably take one question, maybe two, depending on how difficult it is. So first one to throw their hand up will take a question. Wow, no questions. Okay, we got one.
Yeah, sorry, 1 second. How recent are those Power BI templates? I mean, I guess it's a two-part question, because we used them like maybe a year-ish or so ago, probably the newer version that was more.
They've been released in the last quarter. They've been updated to support the policies that we talked about for delegating access to the auto-attendance and call queues. So you could delegate the access to those reports for business users. So there's a whole refresh that they've done, and there's a new version. And I think they've indicated on the old version now, there's a label that says this old version is only supported for so long.
Okay, cool. I guess the last one you couldn't, I mean, if we dug into it and that we kind of gave up on it, but it was only like UTC time was the only.
The new template actually, when you launch it, it has some Power BI properties. So you can specify the time zone now. Always stay with the current versions.
Okay, we got time.
You had mentioned that with shared calling and specific to direct route, there was no way to distinguish who actually received the call. Is that the same case for Active Connect?
So not receive the calls. There's no indication that it's a shared call from a user versus the resource account. So from a bill back point of view, it just looks like the resource account made the call, not, hey, we have 5,000 users using that resource account to make the call. So for a direct routing SaaS provider, that might be an issue if they're doing a per number model versus a consumption channel model.
Mark.
Right? That may be have changed. I mean, always keep on top, but when we played in the tap, it was not the case. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yep. 2 minutes, throw one in. So I'm not sure on the posting schedule, but the session's recorded and we'll be providing the slides. So follow the conference website or the
And
YouTube channel.
notifications that they'll send you out as well.
So Microsoft's new program for consumption billing is part of the new commerce experience, NCE. So with that, you're supposed to be doing consumption billing through that. So it's harder and harder if you're moved to the new licensing to still activate net new communication credits in a tenant. And if you want any information, Dino behind you has loved the migration.
Well, I think that's it for this morning. Really appreciate everyone coming in and sitting in with us.